Ampire.
Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone. What's up, Callow? How are you today? Got your first Caps win last night. Booyah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was nice. That was a definitive win too. Like very good win. Didn't just eke it out. Yeah, very, very good.
Yeah. I'll talk about them in a minute. I want to start with the old footballs. For those of you watching on YouTube, you will not be able to see this later. For those listening on the radio, Anish Shroff, my former colleague from ESPN, who calls the Panthers games, is going to join me soon, later on in the show. And he goes into detail about Bryce Young, about why he's not playing. So it's really good and kind of gives you the lay of the land. And after you hear what he says about the Panthers defense, if we don't score 30 on them, it will be a shock to me. So this is either going to be a big Commanders win or just a very high scoring game. One of the two. That's what I'm waiting to actually see. So we'll see what happens on Sunday. All right, let's get into the other stuff that's going on real quick. Jerry Jones wants to fire sports radio hosts today. Jerry's age is catching up with him. He went full old man on sports radio hosts who I'm confused by the relationship here. He goes on the stations,
plural,
willingly. The one that he went on yesterday, the hosts who are there have been there a long time. They've been doing these interviews with him. I've often marveled that I appreciate that he does this because very few owners actually do this, but he is the GM of the team too. So he really should be accountable. And he also likes the media. And in the midst of them getting blown out by Detroit, the hosts basically start going back over. They want to do the whole, this started in January when you didn't do this and told us you were going all in, and wanted to do the whole rundown with them. And he wasn't having it. And then in the middle of it said, that's not your job to do what you're doing right now. And I could have a different person ask the questions and I'm being serious. So one, I don't know the relationship enough to know. I'm assuming, I think the station pays the Cowboys to have Jerry Jones on, but he's insinuating he pays them interviews on a quote unquote independent station. So I need to know what's the relationship here, guys, before I can really cast a judgment on what he did yesterday.
I took it as he could just do it on another show. That was my takeaway. That it was okay. Like I could take this to any other station and they would ask me questions, and it doesn't have to 100%. Be like this. But what's always funny about this is Jerry is so Vince McMahon-ish, because we've heard about this with Jerry. He like courts the media and courts those guys in the offseason, and he likes them asking him tough questions and stuff. It's just really funny when he pulls the curtain back like he did yesterday and he gets pissed off because they're asking valid questions. Remember, we reference his one that he went off like 4 years ago where he was like, I got the patience to jack with you and all that stuff, where he's done this before, but this one was a different level, clearly, because he knew going into it he was screwed. It was the worst loss under his ownership. And by the way, I want to criticize him on one thing that he said. He continually references, oh, everyone told me the biggest mistake I did was buy the Cowboys. And it's like, dude, you were really good from 89 to 97. So you're milking the last 27 years off of your first 8 years owning the team. Like, it's a little ridiculous. I'm sick of hearing about that one. If you want to talk to me about the branding, that's a different thing. But don't tell me you know what you're doing on the field when it comes down to it.
The whole, everyone said I was crazy buying the Cowboys. What are you talking about? Like
right.
That's like, shut up. Like that one's ridiculous. Like, all of these franchises go up in value constantly. And, could he have envisioned it'd be worth what it's worth now? Probably not. But like, would it be worth more than he paid for it? Yeah, I think so. You own a priceless piece of art. Okay. Second, on the questioning. And it was funny. It's worth listening to. They didn't ask him anything that was unfair at all, period. And this goes back to messaging matters. When he went back in the offseason and said, we're all in, but they didn't have the cap room to do anything that was all in. And they had major contracts that they had to deal with, namely CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. I looked at it and I went, people need to stop painting like they can go do things in free agency. Their cap situation it prohibits them from doing so. And I thought it was funny when people were trying to go down a line of questioning where they're like, are you being cheap by not giving Dak the money or giving CD the money? And I'm sitting there going, they've paid their stars. It's not that they don't do that either. So I think his messaging of we're all in to win was misconstrued from, and I think rightly so, by the people who cover them to go, okay, well, I guess you're going to make this team better, when all they saw were parts that were being stripped away. The defensive staff, some of the defensive players, a couple of the offensive players. I talked about this for months. I'm like, there is no chance on earth that's a 12-win team again. And I'm not really and honestly, I was on board with let Dak's contract run out, because you might be in reset mode and you've got to pay Micah Parsons and you got to pay CeeDee Lamb. Like, you got to think about this. And if he doesn't show you with a lesser quality roster that he can elevate them, that it might be time to move on. But I think he got bullied and pressured into doing this contract with him. And now it's looking dumb. And I like them unraveling this year was predictable to me. And they may still turn it around. But after last week, watching the Lions toy with them, seeing him freak out, knowing Micah goes on, podcasts and asks questions about why they're this and why they're that, and there's an intense amount of scrutiny on them because they are who they are. Like, this was like what I thought might happen. They probably aren't a below 500 team, like roster wise, but all those outside pressures may make them one. And now they got some injury. Now they got their owner losing it on sports radio hosts. Them finishing 7-10. That's like the path starts to open for teams like us. And this is best case scenario if it's going to go like this, because they are better than what they showed last week, but they're crumbling under the pressure and you can feel it. Totally feel it.
Well, the other thing is it actually wasn't really the public perception to get Dak signed. It was their own fault. Remember, he has that clause in his contract where had he just not gotten re-signed by the new league year, there was a $40 million dead cap hit. Like, Jerry played Jerry on that one. He had to sign Dak because he was already committing $40 million to this one player. You might as well commit the other 20 and have a quarterback instead of just having a hole on your roster. Now, I'm with you. They could have hit the reset button. But what was also really funny with Jerry was he waited all of that time to not only sign Dak, but then sign CeeDee Lamb the week before the season started. Had he just done it earlier in the offseason, he would have saved money because the price went up literally over the next 3 months. Like, that's the weird thing here is you're actually not making sound business decisions either. You're waiting for no reason, and your cap is now even more strapped than it was before.
This is why it's fair to ask him about all of this stuff. Put back to him, the team is in the place that it's like they should never lose 47-9 or whatever the score was. And so that's on the players and the coaches, because but losing to the Lions, who are a legitimate contender, when you are a team that's resetting yourself, or I'm not even sure what your plan is right now after re-signing Dak, I'm not even totally sure what their plan is kind of moving forward, but it is fair to ask the GM why you've made these decisions. And he went full either Vince McMahon, or I'd call it Trump. You're just not going to admit fault. We're in this new normal where if you do make mistakes, and it is clear that they've made mistakes in the roster construction or the reset that they're trying to pull off here, which I don't even think they're resetting anymore by re-signing Dak. Well, they're not admitting that they're wrong. And that's why he's so ticked off, because he thinks that he's you can't approach him that way and essentially explain himself, even though he's the reason why their roster's in the situation that it's in. So it's totally fair to ask him about that. I don't blame him for them losing 47-9. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen. But I do blame him for them being a 500 team. You're allowed to blame the GM for that when it's obvious that that's the case. Jerry's losing that fastball a little bit. And not unlike Trump a little bit here too, he meanders in his answers. If you listen to these answers when he talks, it's the weave. I don't know what he's talking about half the time. He gives these long, crazy, verbose answers that all circle back to kind of nothing. And you got to find the part in the middle that actually is newsworthy of it or is actually on topic. So it's this is good for all of us. If this is what they're going to be, the older he gets, the more poor decisions he makes, the better off we all are in his division for sure. And like they're going the wrong way. Anyway, all right, let me get into us a little bit because I want to get to a point that I'm trying to make with that happening. Okay, subtext of that. John Allen's out for the year. I didn't even really mention it yesterday. I was kind of just forgot to totally mention it yesterday. I don't want to hear that this is not a big loss. I know there's some subset of the fan base that seems to think like, well, he's not what he was a couple of years ago. And, you know, he's making all this money. And if he's not going to have that kind of impact, guys, we don't have anybody nearly as good as him behind him. Now, I'm hoping Johnny Newton becomes that, but like, I don't like putting that kind of pressure. John Allen was a Pro Bowl defensive tackle, was actually playing better the last. I agreed the first few games. I'm not sure where his impact was, but he was getting better as this was going along. And I don't think that he's a replaceable part for them. So while I'll hear out the people going, he's not Aaron Donald. No, he's not Aaron Donald. They don't have somebody as good as him on this roster on a defense that's ranking in the bottom third right now. They can't stop the run and is having trouble stopping the pass. Like, this is not a good thing. So, like, I want to quell that for a moment. All the people are like, well, you know, we can just replace him. No, you can't, in my opinion. No, you can't actually. I think this is actually a big deal that they don't have him for the rest of the year.
I think with Allen too, you know, he's one of the few leaders they have as well. Like, it's him and Terry you look at as the leaders of this team. I think Jaden's coming into his own, but like
Wagner too. Wagner and Luvu are rising up the charts there as well.
Sure, but like in terms of the guys that are established, he's, you know, he's the one doing the pregame speech and all of that stuff. And he, you know, I'm with you. The people that always want to say, oh, Allen needs to be traded, I'm always like, and replace him with who? Because that's exactly what those conversations should lead to. And it would come down to, no, you don't want to get rid of him. He's still very, very good. We just want a little bit more out of him. I'm hoping that it's by committee and that they can get by without him. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, this is a big loss. And
big loss.
You know what? Like, it's really funny. I'm kind of like looking at Adam Peters like, all right, like, you drafted Newton and you hit on every other pick, it seems. So let's see if this one comes through as well. But it's like, I'm with you. I don't want to put the pressure on Newton on that because Allen was a top draft pick in the first round and has, you know, shown that he's been very, very good. So yeah, I'm with you.
So, all right. So we've reached this point where 4 of the first 6 are on the road. They're 4-2. The schedule is very set up for them with 5 home games over the next 8 weeks and limited travel. New Jersey's the farthest you're going to go, and they're going to have a bye week before they then turn the corner and have a couple of road games in December. But like, it is very set up here for Washington to have a very good record, you know, heading into December when the games really matter. Dallas, let's see what happens from here, right? Like, it's set up for them to go sideways. Maybe they'll steal themselves and maybe they'll turn things back around, but it's not sounding or looking good right now for them. I think the Giants are who the Giants are, especially if Neighbors is going to be hurt and missing time. They're more competitive than they've been, but they're not good enough to win, and their quarterback play is 4th best in the division. So, like, you do the math on that. And with the Eagles, they're another one. Like, let's see how they handle themselves after their next big loss when they have their coach freaking out on fans and then having to apologize for it. And they're just not as prolific offensively that they've been in the past. So, like, let's see what happens. Like, you could make the case, we're the normal ones. I mean, this is weird times now. We're in a weird new normal. We're the normal ones, stable ones all of a sudden. So it's set up. That's all. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's set up. So I think you have to start really kind of make the case to buy here at the deadline if you're Washington. With Allen going out, you know, I don't know that you go and find the next defensive tackle for them. But if the right person was available on a rental, I'll hear it now. I think it is clear as day that they have to, if they can, upgrade the corners. And I understand, like, I am all for we're in the long haul. This is the first year of it. I don't want to give away a first-round pick to anybody, but we have a lot of draft picks again. We have a lot of cap room to spare. Like, we have some assets. And I was thinking about this, and I was talking to Keim last night about this, and I'm like, you know what the chief complaint about the Orioles is? The chief complaint is that they have all these really young, good players, and they're treating them like precious gems that they can't part with. And everybody is sitting there going, but you could win now if you're willing to give up a couple of them to bring in people to help you win now. And while this is on no typical track of any NFL team to do something like what they're doing, because it's kind of unprecedented that with a rookie quarterback, he's this far ahead of the curve. With a team with a new staff, new front office, new ownership, that they would turn around and be this stable and this kind of ready to compete. And then with a roster that was totally flipped over, this is the story a movie is made of. Like, it's ridiculous. But the reality is it is happening. And because it's happening, and because I've watched what's happened with the Orioles, and I'm sitting there going, I get what they're saying about them. Like, I know this is ahead of schedule, and a couple years from now, it doesn't mean it's not happening now. And because it's happening now, give these guys a real chance to win. So I will make the case that I don't want to do anything nuts, and I don't think they will because they've been very disciplined. But I think this team should be buyers now with this team, specifically on defense, where it is right now, because the door's open. And you know what? They're already, every week we laugh about all the unprecedented historic things this team does. It means they have a chance to win and they can compete. Give them a chance to win. And I'm hoping that, I don't know how internally they feel about it, but I don't know what their expectations were, but mine have changed. And looking around the landscape, changed enough that I think the case is made here. That, like, I'm not going to do anything nuts that, that like really kind of puts them in a cap crimp in the future or gives up picks for no reason. They're not in a go over the top situation. I do think they should be buyers here. And I think they've put good reason on the field to let you feel that way about them. Give them a chance to win. That's the way I feel about it.
I'm only making a move for a corner. That's the only position that I'm touching here. I think everyone needs to realize it's still just year one, though. Like, let the timeline. It is
year one, but look what they're doing. Why are we not trying to win? The window somehow is. Oh, I don't know how, and I can't believe it is, but it's open for them. So give this team a chance to win. Is how I feel about it.
I'd only trade for a corner that if somebody's trying to unload somebody on a rental deal that you can extend out. Other than that, I'm not making any moves because Adam Peters is nailing the draft picks at this point. Like, let's talk next year if they're still performing at this level and they have another draft class here where half the roster wasn't turned over. Like, that's what I'm saying. I
hear you. But how do you then square? They're 4-2 with the number one scoring offense in the league, and you don't sit there and go, but if our defense was a little bit better than what it is, don't we give ourselves a chance? Like, don't we do that?
But that player might not exist. Like, if we want to give up a first-round pick, sure. But you're saying don't do anything rash. I don't know what position exists that they're only going to get there with a third-round pick, essentially. And granted, by the way,
saying, like, this whole conventional wisdom of, like, we're resetting and we're rebuilding, I agree with it. And they haven't done anything that's undisciplined yet. Not once. They didn't go get Ayuk. They didn't give up their first-round picks for anybody. They never gave anybody any ash term. Like, I love what they did. And clearly they did very well with the draft. And, like, so I trust them. I will trust them here, too. I think, because I could see it on Adam Peters' face, he hates losing. Like, you could just feel it and see it. Like, he hates it. I think if there is a rational, disciplined move to make here, I'm all for it in the name of giving this team a chance to win. I know it's ahead of schedule. So what? They're winning. Give them a chance to win. Like, that's how I feel about this one too now. 4-2 with the number one offense, watching what this quarterback does. I'm sorry. Like, I know it's weird and unprecedented and it's unusual and you should be thinking about the future, but I want to think about the future for the first time in forever next year because the present's really good. And I'm open to it differently than I was entering the season. I'm like, oh, let's just get through I'm like you. I'm like, let's get through. I like what we see now. Not at 4-2 with our division crumbling around us. I think there's an opportunity. So give them a chance to win. That's the way I feel about it.
I'm good. Like, I'm only doing it for a cornerback. I'm good with being patient. My expectations of this year was to see if Jaden Daniels is the franchise quarterback. He's here. He's arrived. I get it. I'm not being any more rash than that, though. I'm only getting a player that I think I can extend out who's on a rental deal. And I haven't looked at what corners are free agents that they could possibly pick up. But, like, I look at what the Bills and the Jets did yesterday. They moved third-round picks. If that move exists, go ahead and do that one. Yeah. I just don't know if that one exists. But I'm not trading anything more than that at this point, because I know how much they need to turn over on their roster. Like, you still need to stack this team with some talent and not just rely on free agency in it.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, I see a path here where the playoffs are very possible. And I'm like, you know what? Like, if the right move's there, like, they don't think about next year. We'll get to next year when we get to next year. On those two trades you mentioned, stop telling me Aaron Rodgers isn't the GM of this team. Like, they went and got his guy after the week after they fired the coach, which he claims he had absolutely nothing to do with. Like, they've given him an amount of power I haven't seen a player get in the NFL in a very, very, very long time. And while I love Davante Adams and I think he's great and I'm sure he'll fit in for them, I just know this is not going to end well for them. Like, you just know it. It's not. It doesn't matter what they do. It's not going to end well for them. You just know it. Amari to the Bills is a huge one, I think, and was a great counter move by, to New York, because realistically, if Tua, whether he can come back or not, or whether he should or not, is not really even worth the conversation at this point. I think Miami can't catch both of those teams. This is a 2-team race for that division, and I thought that was a heck of a counter move by the Bills to go get Amari Cooper.
Well, the hilarious part that you just mentioned there is the Dolphins are technically ahead of the Jets in the standings at the moment. So that's the funny part about catching them. But what I'll say is I think the Bills were probably on the phone with the Browns and the Raiders. I think they were probably in on Davante, and they probably just sent him to the Jets because that's who, and there's like that extra pick exchange or whatever it was. I bet you the Bills were like, that's cool, we'll go get Cooper. Cooper was the one that I was circling for this team to get, actually. When everybody was talking about Adams, I wanted Cooper here. And, this was like week 2 or week 3 or whatever it was with Adams. But yeah, this was a great counter move because I think they're both on equal planes. Like, they're both not as good as they once were, but they're both still pretty good. I also think, though, we've lived this before where your record's bad and you make a move and you hope that it works out and it flips everything around. Davante Adams is not flipping that whole team around. So
I don't think so either.
Good luck with all that. And by the way, something that I was seeing a little bit yesterday too was Cooper goes for a 3rd-round pick. Adams goes for a 3rd-round pick. We should rewind in the offseason where Adam Peters unloaded Jahan Dotson for a 3rd-round pick, essentially. And remember, people were kind of off on that. There was some exchange
in
there.
In fairness, we gave back a 5th. People forget that part. So we gave back a pick as well. But I, with your premise, I agree with you. We got incredible value for him. 100%.
I get it. Like, there was the 5th that we threw back, but to kind of upgrade that return, good on Peters there. Like, that looks better in retrospect with that move.
Yep. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram Buster Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Let me welcome in the play-by-play voice of the Carolina Panthers, and of course, a voice that you'll hear on college football and all sorts of sports over on ESPN, my old colleague from my days back in Bristol, Anish Shroff. Great to talk to you, Anish. Thanks for coming on today.
Always, Bram. Always, man. Good to talk to you.
Before I get into the Panthers-Commanders game, you were actually on the call of the Virginia Tech-Miami game a few weeks back, which obviously we have a ton of alums and fans of Tech around here, which had a very unusual and controversial ending where Tech scores what looked to be a touchdown at the end of the game in the back of the end zone in a 50-50, you make the call, who's got it, and they gave it to Miami. So what'd you think at the time, and what do you make of that call now?
So at the time, we're really just trying to sort through the carnage, right? And when we watched the first couple of replays, the feeling that we had, pretty much a consensus in our booth, was it doesn't quite look like a catch, but the ruling on the field, which is so important, the ruling on the field was touchdown. So if that's the ruling on the field, now you're looking for a clear, obvious, indisputable video evidence to overturn the call. And you can sit there and say, I think it's an incomplete pass. It looks to be an incomplete pass. But if there is even a scant scent of doubt, you have to default to the ruling on the field. The call stands. And so I didn't think there was enough to overturn the call. Frankly, had it been ruled incomplete, there wasn't going to be had it been ruled, yeah, incomplete. I don't think there would have been anything to overturn that either. I think whatever the ruling on the field was, you were going to default to it. So I think from that standpoint, if you're going to rule it a touchdown on the field, which the officials did, that has to stand. And then the ACC puts out a statement afterwards, which was a little baffling, where they point to a Miami player being out of bounds, touching the ball, which would make it incomplete. And nowhere in any of the replays that we showed was there video evidence of that. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if you're a fan and you're watching it, you see how the aftermath unfolded, and you say, hey, hang on a second. Miami's the only undefeated team in the ACC, and they look to be the ACC's best bet right now for a playoff team in a league that's probably a one-bid league, maybe a very outside shot at two. But again, I'm not the conspiracy theorist, but if you're a fan, I kind of get it. So yeah, I feel bad for Virginia Tech fans because again, if the call on the field was a touchdown, I thought there was not nearly enough evidence that didn't meet the threshold to overturn the call.
No, and the oddest part of it was you guys must have showed the replay 1,000 times, and the one that seemed to be at least used that got to the point where they overturned it was an almost extremely pixelated view of it. And I'm looking at this going, if you have to get to this level to try to change that call, I don't know how you come up with the excuse to do so, but whatever, it's done is done now.
Well, even our rules expert, Matt Austin, who was on the broadcast that night, we brought him in over that sequence, and I think the words out of his mouth were, I think it's incomplete. And we asked him right away, we said, okay, Matt, you think it's incomplete, but is there enough to overturn the call? And he very quickly said no. He said, I can sit here and say, I think it's incomplete. I don't think that it's a catch, but if you can't say it definitively with the evidence to corroborate it, you default to the ruling on the field. So it almost felt like they went into the replay booth and now you got to figure out, well, you know, which side are we leaning on? I think it's 80-20 when the reality is it's got to be 100-0 to overturn the call.
Yeah. All right. Let me lean on your college expertise just for a moment in regard to the Panthers and Commanders this week, because we were talking off the air and you reminded me, one, you were at Jaden Daniels' first spring game at LSU. Is that right?
I was.
You covered that. And I think I don't want to reveal too much, but I think you said to me, you're a little surprised that he is what he is now off of what you saw a couple of years ago.
He was brand new. I think you got to remember that, right? He had just transferred there from Arizona State, new system, Brian Kelly's first year. And you're watching him and you can see the physical tools, right? You can see his ability to throw the ball, the arm strength, his ability to move, but there was nothing. And this was, again, a very controlled scrimmage, essentially a spring game. There was really nothing that made you go, wow, this guy's going to be a future Heisman Trophy winner. This guy's going to be now the odds-on favorite to be the Rookie of the Year in the NFL. There was none of that. Frankly, it kind of reminded me of Joe Burrow's first season at LSU. I had a LSU game when Burrow had transferred in from Ohio State his first season, and what you saw was a solid game manager, decent college quarterback, and then year two at LSU, he just exploded and took the leap. And you know, Daniels had a decent first season at LSU. He had a solid season at LSU, and then year two, I mean, we saw what he did, and very deservedly won the Heisman, and he's taken that to the NFL. But yeah, I was as surprised as anybody with how his college career played out, because even if you go back to Arizona State, you know, he has that dynamic freshman season and then took a huge step backwards in his second season at Arizona State.
He did. What was really so telling about him, Anish, because obviously we had such a high draft pick and we were assuming it was going to be Caleb Williams, him, or Drake May, and we're watching so much about him. The improvement from Arizona State to LSU, better league, better competition, was astounding. And I think that's what really gave Washington the real confidence. We had heard about his work ethic, but the leap in play was so great and so it stood out so much that it was, I think in the end, it actually wasn't a hard decision to go with him over May. And the Commanders will never say that publicly. But if you watch what you saw at Arizona State to the finished product at LSU, you start to see there's a sky's the limit, ability about this guy.
And I think there's a lot of value in that because this league is shifting toward athletic quarterbacks. You see it. You saw it last week with Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar was a guy who I think if he was coming out now is probably a slam dunk top 5 pick. When he came out in 2016, 2017, whatever it was, there were still a bunch of teams that were saying publicly, we don't think this guy can even be a quarterback in the NFL. We would take him as an athlete, a receiver, a gadget guy, special teamer. And so the Ravens end up getting him with the last pick in the first round. I think now the league is kind of moving toward athletic quarterbacks. You need a guy who can keep the defense honest. You need someone who can make sure the defense has to have somebody in the box at all times to account for quarterback run. It's just where this league is moving. It's not to say that you can't be a successful pocket passer with your pre-snap reads, but we're starting to see Caleb Williams have some success. C.J. Stroud, who is a pocket passer but can move. We saw what he was able to do last year. Josh Allen can move. Obviously, Mahomes. That's just where this league is headed, and that's the future of the position.
Yeah, I think Washington's also the magic of this start for them too is Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels are oddly on an execution page that is very unusual for a very new staff with a very new roster and a rookie quarterback. But you also had some experience watching Kingsbury in college. So what was your kind of takeaway of seeing him work on that level?
As good a play caller as there was at the college level. And his ability to sequence plays, to set up the defense, the way he used motion and shifts. I used to call it a field trip to Amsterdam. Every time his team broke the huddle, and most of the time they didn't even huddle. It was just, motion and eye candy, all this stuff before the snap. And he would really have a way of messing with the defense's eyes, where this is the picture we want you to see, but this is the actual picture which you're not going to see until the ball was snapped. And now you get into the NFL and you can actually turn up some of the complexity. I think he is a great offensive coordinator. I do think he's still young enough where he's going to have a second act, and maybe even more than that as a head coach in the NFL. I know it didn't work out in Arizona, but I think somebody at some point is going to give him another chance to be a head coach. And I do think he's got a chance to be a successful NFL head coach one day. But when it comes to play design, scheming up his guys, and what he does, I think, as well as anybody, he's really good at saying, all right, these are the ingredients that I have. This is the quarterback that I have. This is what he does well. How can I maximize his strengths, minimize his weaknesses? How can I get the guys in the right spot? He can do that with an offense. He can really do that with a quarterback, having played the position. So I think, again, you get a guy who's got the raw talent of Jaden Daniels, but then you also bring in a young offensive coordinator, or still young offensive coordinator, not young as he used to be, who really understands, how Daniels plays, what he does well, and let's now get him into spots where he can do that stuff.
Is a field trip to Amsterdam copyrighted? Because I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use that one. That one's, you've officially handed that one over to me. That's coming out of my mouth at some point this year.
You got to put a quarter in the cookie jar. That's all.
Got it. All right. All right. You guys have obviously what was the hope of a franchise quarterback there who's not starting right now. Could you put into context the first year plus of Bryce Young? And then secondarily, do you think he will play again at some point this season?
I think so. When that will be, I think depends on probably what happens over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But I just think last year as a rookie quarterback, the calculus was off. You got to go back 2 years, really. Go back to 2022. That team started 1-5. At 1-4, they made the coaching change where Steve Wilkes takes over for Matt Rule. And they were actually a pretty decent team the rest of the way. They finished 7-10, week 17 at Tampa, 10-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Tom Brady. Had they held on and won that game, they would have been going into Week 18 at New Orleans, needing a win and nothing else to win the division and host a playoff game. They end up getting the last great game of Tom Brady's career, still end up winning against New Orleans in Week 18, finished 7-10, and I think it created a sense of maybe this team is further along than we thought. And so they thought maybe some of these pieces were in place. You drop in the quarterback. The front office had a heavy Seattle flavor to it, including the general manager at the time, Scott Fitterer, who's now with Washington. And so it was this idea, let's drop in the quarterback, much the way Seattle did with Russell Wilson. And then you had injuries to the offensive line, so the skill positions with the trades of DJ Moore and with Christian McCaffrey having been jettisoned to San Francisco. There was just some lack of playmakers, if we're being honest. And the defense was okay last year. On top of that, on paper, this team of rivals idea with the coaching staff sounded really good. You bring in Frank Reich. He's going to bring in an offensive staff who he hadn't worked with, but they're going to bring all these ideas, and they were going to kind of formulate them together, mold them together, and create this great offense. And that backfired. So Reich, midway through the year, turns the play calling over to Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator. Then Frank takes the play calling back. Then Reich is fired. Brown becomes the play caller again. And then, oh, by the way, you had 15 different starting left and right guards a year ago with a rookie quarterback, receivers who at times outside of Adam Thielen is just an underneath guy at this point in his career, struggling to get separation. It was the perfect storm for Bryce Young. And outside of one half against Green Bay, I think you were kind of looking for Bryce to, hey, number one overall pick, and this guy elevate the guys around him, but it just didn't work. And then this year, I just think the confidence just wasn't there. His first pass of the season against New Orleans was an interception, and things snowballed into an avalanche from there. And Dave Canales basically made the move, the new head coach for the Panthers. And if you read between the lines, this was not an ownership move. It wasn't a front office move. This was a head coach move, where he basically said, listen, I believe in my offense. I believe in my process. We have to find out about some of these other guys. And right now it just feels like the quarterback and the quarterback play is holding us back. And so you kind of owe it to the other 52 guys in the locker room to give you a chance to win the game. And he felt Andy Dalton could do that. And Andy Dalton's made this offense respectable. This offense can score. The Bears, who have a really good defense, were able to shut the Panthers down. The other three games where Dalton has started, they've been able to move the ball.
Yeah.
And again, he's a veteran quarterback through the end of his career at 36 years old. But I think Dave Canales has been validated in that regard. For Bryce Young, again, Bram, you know this. You've seen a revolving door of quarterbacks in Washington. I think the reality for Bryce is this: the clock is ticking, right? He's in year 2, and he's going to get chances because he's a former number 1 pick. But how many of those chances are there? I think that is a very valid question. And if he doesn't make the most of his second chance, whether it's in Carolina or somewhere else, you're probably going to get branded then as nothing more than a backup quarterback.
On the other side of the ball, I don't know if you have the worst scoring defense in the league, but it's got to be up there. So what's happening with the Panthers defense this year?
Injuries. I mean, there's no other way around it. Derek Brown, who's the best player on the team. A season ago, Brown, as a D lineman and an interior D lineman, was the first D lineman in the history of NFL to record 100 tackles in a season. I know they haven't been recording that stat forever. It's about a 30-year-old stat, still very impressive. He was the heartbeat of the team. Week 1, he suffers a knee injury, out for the year. So you're without your best player on the team. You traded away Brian Burns. Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin are in Washington. You go to the next level, the linebacking position. DJ Wanham was added to be a pass rusher. He has not played in a game yet. You won't see him this weekend. He's been hurt since camp. Shaq Thompson, one of the captains, second longest tenured Panther, out for the season. Josie Jewell missed now a couple of games with an injury, so your 2 starting middle linebackers are gone. Essentially, one of the guys stepping in is a practice squad guy. The other is a rookie out of Kentucky who has, played pretty well, 24 tackles in his first 2 starts, but he's now the green dot and the communicator, and that's a lot to put on him. And then Jadeveon Clowney got hurt against Chicago, didn't play last week. So the 4 guys that you had penciled in to start at linebacker in your 3-4 scheme, 3 of those definitely won't play this weekend. I guess there is an off chance Josie Jewell comes back, and we'll see about Clowney. But that position's been decimated. Then you lose your starting safety and starting corner. Oh. So, they've been down 6-7 starters most of the year on defense. And, I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
That just makes it tough sledding, and you're just riding uphill. And it puts a lot of pressure on this offense where, essentially the Panthers are in a spot right now where it feels like you got to score 30 points to have a chance to win.
Yeah. All right, let me ask you about Luvu since you mentioned him. Why in the world is he not there? Why is he here?
I think some of that probably has to do with just resources being devoted in the offseason to the offensive side of the ball, because a big priority was you got to find out what you have in Bryce Young. If Bryce is the guy, it changes the trajectory of the franchise going forward. And so as they sort of transition with this new coaching staff, with Dan Morgan now as the general manager, they've preached discipline, building this thing back up the right way. And so in this season, the emphasis was on getting more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. That's why they traded for Deontay Johnson. And unfortunately, it led to some tough decisions on defense, trading away Brian Burns, letting Frankie Luvu go. But he was fun to watch. He was a great guy in the locker room.
Yeah.
A human tempest, man. Played with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
Sideline to sideline, could blitz, had the occasional interception, forced fumbles. I mean, you guys are seeing it now. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah, he's been great. All right, last thing, and I just this is a hard question to ask, but Luvu's here. You mentioned Burns. McCaffrey plays for San Francisco. DJ Moore's in Chicago. These are all really good players that were wearing that uniform. Can you just kind of give me a sense of what they're thinking as they try to rebuild this franchise? When I know all these, we're in it, so I know all these, they're not all the same and they're all different. That's a lot of really good players that don't wear that uniform anymore. How do they kind of explain what they're trying to build down there right now?
Yeah, and again, every situation I think is just different. I think if they could do it again with Burns, a few years ago, the Rams offered 2 number 1s and a number 2 for Brian Burns. And hindsight's 20/20. You probably take that at the time. They thought they could sign him. And then when Joey Bosa signed his big extension, it really changed the market for edge rushers. McCaffrey, remember his last few years in Carolina, he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And so they get off to a 1-4 start, 1-5 start, whatever it was in 2022. And you got a team offering you a 2 and a 5 for a running back with a lengthy injury history, and it doesn't seem like you're going anywhere at the time. Okay, you make that trade, and obviously McCaffrey goes on and stays healthy for a year and a half in San Francisco, but now he's hurt again.
Yep.
DJ Moore, that one hurt, right? That one, I think there's no way around it. I think in hindsight, again, if the Bears would have taken Brian Burns, you probably do that. And you probably keep DJ Moore and give Bryce Young a bona fide number 1 wide receiver when he steps in as a rookie. But, each case is kind of individual. At the same time, there's no way around it. I mean, that is talent. And, again, one thing that they have preached, and it's tough because you've had, 6 straight losing seasons. But at some point, you have to have discipline in terms of how you build your roster. And I give Dan Morgan a lot of credit. There's certain things I know you probably can't say out loud, but they want to build this thing the right way. And, Bram, you'll see it when you watch this team on Sunday. This is a bona fide top 5 offensive line. Oh. And what do you always say? When you want to build a team, you want to build from the trenches out.
Yep.
It's a much better defensive line if Derek Brown is healthy. He's not, but they locked him up to an extension in the offseason. So he's going to be a Panther for the next 3-4 years. But this O-line is really good. Chuba Hubbard is 3rd in the NFL in rushing, while 10th in attempts. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. Xavier Legette, the rookie first-rounder out of South Carolina, he's got a couple of touchdown catches already. He can go get the 50-50 ball. So it's not going to be a miracle overnight, but I think the hope is, and you're starting to see it, there are some pieces that maybe can be the next foundation. Trevin Wallace, first start as a rookie against Chicago, 15 tackles. The only other Panthers rookie with 15 tackles or more in a game was Luke Kuechly.
That's amazing. Anish, I really thank you for all the time, and I look forward to seeing you this Sunday up in Landover. All right, welcome back. I don't have a lot of time here, so I'm just going to mention this for a moment. Maybe I'll revisit it if I have more time tomorrow. But Nate Silver thinks our sports town sucks, which, triggers me like beyond belief through the years. If anyone comes at us like, you don't walk into someone else's church and complain about how they pray. And that's what he did here. Nate Silver, if you don't know, Nate Silver is the analytics guru who has predicted through polling political races across the board, namely national ones, for years, and has become an expert at it, was then hired to run 538 for ESPN. So he did a lot of analytical models for sports that didn't really take off because people just didn't care. And it was not dumbed down enough, I think, for everybody to really understand it. But Nate Silver is kind of like the pinnacle of polling. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, maybe it's because he's a known quantity and he has a lot of followers, like over 3 million followers, that people got all upset about it. But I'm like, and why does anybody care what he thinks? Like, I didn't quite get it.
That's where I landed with him too, of why are you weighing in on this? And with him too, the way he worded it was weird as well. Like, he mentioned the Caps, the Nats, the Wizards, and the Commanders. And all I could think of was the Nats won a World Series. The Caps won a Stanley Cup. The Capitals have one of the greatest hockey players of a generation. The Commanders look like they're on the up and up. The Wizards, I'll hear you out on. But for the three of the four, I don't know what he was talking about.
Well, I don't know, like, what I'd like for him to define, what does he mean by good sports town? Like, what are you talking about? Because, like, I don't know, like, all of a sudden we're kind of the hot new thing in the NFL, which I get it, for a long time we weren't, but we are. We did just win the Cup. We did just win a World Series. It wasn't that long ago. I'm not sure what he's talking about. Like, he just doesn't like going to our games. Like, what is he even referring to? Like, I don't understand it.
It's also, he doesn't really understand this city as well. Like, I will be the first to say, do we have the most passionate fan bases? No, not really, actually. Like, the Commanders fan base is better than all of the other ones in terms of straight up passion, right? But look at what the other teams have done to kind of get themselves closer to that level. Like, I look at the Nats. The Nats are genius in the way that they market their team, essentially. They have the diehard baseball fans and they go old school, but they also have that, loft out in the center field where all the Capitol Hill interns show up, 2 innings into the game, right? They know who they are and they've marketed themselves that way easily. The Capitals say, we're going to be a hockey club. You're going to have a good time here. You're going to go watch Ovechkin score goals. They've marketed themselves in a way to cut through all of the junk in the city. I'm sorry our city has so much to offer, dude, that maybe you don't feel like we're as passionate as other fan bases, but really ridiculous to even try to say that we're a bad sports town. We're not.
I just don't get it. I don't even know. And I think largely I'm like, I don't know why people care so much, but here I am talking about it too. But it was only because I think people cared so much about it. Like, what do you care what he thinks? Like,
right.
He's a political polling expert. Like, what do you give a crap what he thinks?
Right.
Zachary, give Nate Silver a show on the Monumental Network, and then maybe we'll convert him to a DC sports fan.
That's not happening.
That's a good guess for Saliza, by the way. You ought to have him on. Talk to him about that.
I agree.
All right, last thing real quick. Jake the Snake Joe. Jake the Snake helps the Capitals get their first win, Joe. How about that?
That was very, very fitting that Jacob Vrana scores on his first shot of the game against the team they beat in the Stanley Cup in 2018. That guy, I mean, you talk to anyone around the organization, has worked his ass off to get back into the lineup with the Caps. And I thought the Caps actually, they did a solid game one. They said to Sonny Milano, we're going to give you a chance here. And if we don't see it, Jake's getting in. And that's exactly what happened. And it paid off for the first goal yesterday. And then the Caps, that second period, they dominated the Knights, scored 3 straight goals in I think it was 3 minutes and change. Yeah, 3 minutes and change of game time, and then they locked in. Really good win by the Caps. This was Vegas's first road trip, so you take a little bit of that with them moving over to the East Coast. But no, really good win. Logan Thompson made a couple of really big stops, which I thought was really encouraging yesterday. Really good first win for the Caps yesterday.
Yeah, it was. All right, I've gone too long today, so I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bram, watch the show. ESPN 630 Sports Capital.